Shields up, Iron Breakers. Rurikhan here coming at you with another video, and today I'm going to be bringing you my Charge Blade guide for Sunbreak. This video will not be replacing my original Monster Hunter Rise Charge Blade guide, because in that video I go over every single move and mechanic possible for the Charge Blade, whereas in here I'll be focusing on the core fundamentals of the weapon, the main combos I use during a hunt, and which switch skills I consider more valuable for each slot, and why. It's also important to mention that I'll be using the DualShock 4 button layout in this guide, because the Xbox and Switch controllers use the same letters but position them in different places, which could lead to some confusion. There should be an image on screen right now showing you the different controller layouts, which you can use as a reference in case you use a different controller from me. If you use keyboard and mouse, I'm afraid you'll need to figure it out for yourself, as I don't really do keyboard and mouse in Monster Hunter. Anyway, let's get started. What is the Charge Blade all about? Well, it turns out one of the Monster Hunter devs thought the sword and shield was trash. I'm not joking, we talked about this on the Third Fleet podcast with Socks. So this dev went about making a new one that would transform into a massive chainsaw axe with lightning explosions. Very much like the Switch Axe, this weapon has two modes: Sword and Shield mode, which you'll traditionally use to charge up a resource called files, and Axe mode, which you'll use to expend said files. As you can imagine, in Sword mode you're a little more nimble and you're able to block attacks, whereas in Axe mode your mobility will be reduced to make up for the increased damage. Another feature of the weapon are guard points. These are certain sections of your attack animations that count as if you were blocking, and these particular blocks are more resilient than regular blocks, damage the monsters if your shield is charged, and allow you to chain into counters, which is pretty sweet. As you play Charge Blade, you'll be able to charge up your shield, charge up your sword, engage in chainsaw mode, and unleash all kinds of explosions. This might seem a little complicated, and I always hear people talk up the complexity of the weapon, but in reality, once you come to terms with some of its core concepts, it very quickly becomes second nature. So don't be discouraged from giving the weapon a try. Now, Charge Blade files come in two varieties: impact files and elemental files. Impact files deal KO damage, like a hammer, and scale with the artillery skill, raw damage, and attack modifiers. Element files deal elemental damage and scale with the weapon's elemental damage and any skills that increase elemental attack. Unlike in Monster Hunter Rise, elemental charge blades are actually exceptionally good in Sunbreak. Just make sure to look at your target's hit zones to ensure maximum success. On a side note, I'll be using Monster Hunter World terminology to reference Super Amped Elemental Discharge, since the localization team couldn't decide if they wanted to call this attack Super Element Discharge or Ultra Element Discharge. I'll make that decision for them and just use the well-known SAD most people are familiar with. This concludes weapon fundamentals. Let's take a look at the switch skills. Morph Slash versus Counter Morph Slash. Okay, when it comes to these two, you're basically looking at speed versus amped elemental discharge damage. Both moves swap between sword and axe mode, and both moves have guard points. Morph Slash is the traditional swap you might have seen in previous Monster Hunters, whereas Counter Morph Slash is a slower version of the swap. However, this slower version gives you more guard point frames in the animation, and if you counter the guard point into an amped elemental discharge, you'll deal more damage than normal. If you're unfamiliar with these concepts, I'll be showing them in practice later in the video, don't you worry. The way I tend to play Charge Blade is I usually have a scroll for Super Amped Elemental Discharge Playstyle and another one for Condensed Spinning Slash, or as I like to call it, Chainsaw Mode. And usually, I use Counter Morph Slash for the SAD and Morph Slash for Chainsaw Mode. Condensed Element Slash versus Condensed Spinning Slash. So, Condensed Element Slash powers up your sword, giving you Natural Mind's Eye, which means your attacks never bounce, and every sword attack now triggers file explosions. This skill is great for playstyles that want to focus on spamming SAD attacks, since that animation finishes in sword mode, which would disable the other skill, Condensed Spinning Slash. Now, Condensed Spinning Slash is basically chainsaw mode. After you trigger it, you can hold your attack buttons for additional hits on the monsters. This lasts as long as you stay in axe mode. Sheathing your weapon or morphing the sword cancels the effect. Usually I have both in my loadout, one on each scroll for maximum flexibility. And the cool thing is, if your sword is powered, you switch to axe mode, swap scrolls into the one that has Condensed Spinning Slash, and it will be active. Also, if Condensed Spinning Slash is active, you can keep your attack button pressed during air dash, and it does additional hits, which is pretty awesome. File Follow-Up versus File Follow-Up Firing Pin. This one's pretty simple, even if the in-game description is weird as all hell. File follow-ups are your basic files. If your sword or shield are charged when you attack with them, they'll apply a file, which explodes shortly after for additional damage. File follow-up firing pin applies files which have to be manually detonated with an axe attack. The advantage is they'll deal more damage, but you can only stack 6 of them at a time for detonation, so any further file applications are essentially wasted. Another advantage of firing pin is when you manually detonate files, it extends the amount of time your shield is charged, which makes this my default choice. Axe attacks that use files aren't affected by this selection. At least if they are, I didn't notice it, but I'm not a Charge Blade main. Counter peak performance versus Axe Hopper versus Ready Stance. Now we come to the big one. Let's start by tackling Axe Hopper. This is a skill that is just straight up fun. You jump in the air, you come down on the monster like a ton of bricks, and you can SAD as you are coming down. The melee hit from Axe Hopper hits harder than your regular SAD melee hit, and the aerial component of the attack allows for a massive degree of correction. It's almost like calling in a drone strike, and assuming the monster doesn't hit you, there's a big payoff. The problem with this skill is the animation commitment is extremely long, and the benefits of counter peak performance are just too good. Now, the aptly named counter peak performance is an amazing counter with a really generous window that, if triggered successfully, will recharge your files to full and allow you to chain into SAD or your condensed skill of choice. I usually go for this one over Axe Hopper, although I can see Axe Hopper pulling ahead in certain multiplayer hunts as the monster targets you less and you'll get less value from counter peak performance. Now, Ready Stance is basically forcing a guard point. This is particularly good if you like to play in axe mode a lot, as it essentially gives you a block button for your axe. It recovers faster than counter peak performance in terms of wire bugs, and it allows you to change your facing, which synergizes very well with condensed spinning slash. Regular blocks allow you to counter with a double axe swing attack. Just make sure to not input a direction, otherwise it's not going to work. And hits that knock you back will allow you to go into amped elemental discharge or super amped elemental discharge if your shield is charged. My choices here are usually counter peak performance in my SAD focused scroll and Ready Stance for my condensed spinning slash scroll. Sometimes in multiplayer I'll swap counter peak performance for Axe Hopper. Morphing Advance versus Air Dash. Now look, I never liked Morphing Advance. I understand it has its uses, but I find it boring. This is a skill that moves you in your desired direction. It's great for repositioning and allows you to combo into Axe Double Swing, Amped Elemental Discharge, or a regular sword swing. Air Dash, on the other hand, yeets you in your desired direction with hyper armor into the air with 2 axe attacks and an optional file discharge at the end, which can deal massive damage. When you consider the utility of this skill, the fact that those axe attacks can be used to trigger firing pin, the hyper armor, the dunking potential, and the sheer style, this is a no-brainer to me. And don't you dare look at me like that, judging me for being excited over how flashy this move is. You're literally watching a Charge Blade guide. You're no better than me. You just want to unga bunga SAD and watch the files rip through the monster. Don't deny it. Embrace it. Anyway, that's the switch skills. Let's put all of this into practice, shall we? Okay, now that you have an understanding of the weapon core fundamentals, the different file types, the different switch skills, which ones I prefer to use and why, it's time to put all of that into practice. Just keep in mind that, as with all of my Monster Hunter videos, this is meant to help you get started. The path to mastering the Charge Blade is a long and arduous one. You're not going to get there by watching one video. Speaking of watching videos, if you want to know the very basics of the weapon, like how do I do a perfect, charge double slash? How many transitions can I do to go into axe mode and all of that stuff? I'm not going to be going over that in this video because I already did that video back in Monster Hunter Rise. And if I was to do all of that all over again, the exact same way that I did it for the other video, this would be like 2 hours long or more. And I don't want that. You don't want that. We are focusing on Sunbreak things, okay? So watch the other video if you want to know every single basic concept of the Charge Blade, or pay close attention to the button prompts as they show up on screen. All right? Now, For this particular demonstration, when it comes to switch skills, we're going to be using on the red swap scroll, counter morph slash, condensed element slash, file follow-up firing pin, counter peak performance, and air dash. And then on the blue scroll, we have morph slash, condensed spinning slash, file follow-up firing pin. And I swear to God, whoever came up with that name, I just want to smack you upside the head. Ready stance and air dash. All right, I already told you guys why I picked these switch skills. So if you skipped that part of the video, you need to go back and understand why I have these ones. But anyway, let's get things started, right? We're going to go right ahead and charge our files. Obviously, I'm using load shells in this particular build, so that means once we get to yellow, we're pretty much good to go. I'm going to go ahead and charge our shield now. I mean, this is fairly basic stuff. This is kind of like how you open up on a monster. You go up, you start smacking it around to charge your stuff, right? So now we're going to charge up again because we're going to load up our sword. We already have yellow once again. That's going to give us full files. Hold the button on triangle. That's how you charge your swords. Now we have sword and shield both charged. Now we're using file firing pin. Now this is really cool because whenever you hit the monster, that's one file. Hit it again. That should be 2 files. Hit it again. That's 3 files. Hit it again. That's 4 files. Hit it again. That's 5 files. Hit it again. That's 6 files. And you're like, oh man, that's pretty cool. Look at that. That actually stays around for quite a bit. I don't know the exact timing on it. It doesn't really matter. But basically, whenever you want to detonate those, you can go ahead and swap into axe mode. Pop! And you'll see that that was 7 hits. The reason that was 7 hits, it was the melee hit plus the 6 files popping. Because 6 files is as much as you can stack. Now the advantage of the firing pin, like I told you guys, that it's going to keep your shield charge going. But it's not going to keep your sword charge going. So you will have to refresh the sword charge as it becomes needed, okay? But the shield charge should be pretty much taken care of so long as you keep popping those. But naturally, you guys are going to go like, but Rurikhan, swapping the axe mode is boring unless I'm doing an SAD. And yeah, that's the good thing. You can pop those bad boys with an SAD. You see, it even popped by just the axe going close to it. We didn't even hit the monster. We just came close to the file. Boom, they popped straight up. Real nice. So that's one way of popping them, but you guys might be like, yeah, but SAD isn't always the easiest way of popping those, right, Rurikhan? Because, you know, monsters are going to be moving all of this stuff. What if I need to pop these because I don't want to lose my shield charge? Well, that's where air dash come in. Boom! And they popped. Real nice. So that was air dash. I love air dash. Air dash is friggin' amazing. I love it. I never liked morphing advanced like I said. So, you know, I just love it. I think it's a blast. And let's go ahead and charge our sword again. Because now we're going to do air dash but with a twist, right? See, at the end of air dash, you can press circle and that's going to give you a file discharge. Look at this. Pow! 278, and that's KO damage because we're using an impact file. You can get a lot more damage out of this if you use elemental charge blade. I don't know if my build videos are going to be out by the time this video is out or if this one comes out, and then I'll pop the mixed sets over on YouTube. But either way, you need to check out those mixed sets so that you can see the potential of this thing when it comes to elemental because it can be a lot more. But this one does KO, which is pretty sweet. And you can detonate the files like this. Pop that. Look at that. KO. Straight up. Real nice. And this is a really cool thing because this attack has invincibility frames, which means you can kind of just like keep popping it off. Look at how fast it recharges, right? You just go like, oh, monster moving too fast, being annoying. I'm just going to pop a couple of files until he chills out. Now, another really cool trick that you can do with air dash, and I friggin' love this, by the way. This is really, really cool. So you charge your sword, right? And you're like, okay, wouldn't it be cool if air dash also did condensed spinning slash? So remember how I told you I have condensed spinning slash on the blue scroll, right? So my sword is charged. If we swap into axe mode, my sword is still charged. Now, it's important that you swap to axe mode before you swap scrolls. Otherwise, this is not going to work, right? But we swap to axe mode. Now we swap scrolls. Boom. Oh, look at that. Condensed spinning slash already active. Nice. So what can we do with this thing now? Well, if we keep the button pressed after we do the input for air dash, you're going to get this. Whee! Now, I don't know about you. I actually directed that one wrong. I'm sorry about that. You can basically direct the file charge while you're in the air. But it's like, that is a really cool piece of you know, you're just like, oh, I want to slash it, but yeah, I want to stay in sword mode as much as I can. But then you can swap to the blue scroll, and condensed is going to be active so long as you're in axe mode when you make the swap, and you can use condensed to do the air dash for extra hits. It just feels so good to do. I cannot tell you guys how good that friggin' feels. Anyway, going back to actually, I just lost sword mode charge there because I messed it up. But anyways, going back to sword mode, the other stuff that you usually tend to do with Charge Blade, everything still works. You still have counter peak performance, which is what I tend to use. So it's like, if you want to go ahead and pop that off, let me just put the training dummy here. I'm going to give myself infinite wire bug use just because it makes it easier to test stuff out. And let's go ahead and make him stomp with a major tremor. Because that's going to be important for me to show you guys something. So, this still works pretty much the same way as it always does, right? You know, you press your left trigger, press a circle, boom. You can go from that into condensed element slash, or you can go from that into the super amped elemental discharge, or in this case amped because we lost our shield charge. Let me just very quickly charge up our shield. And you can chain that into they call it ultra element discharge. I've just been referencing it to super amped, but that naturally attacks faster than you can recover from a super amped, so keep those things in mind, right? So obviously you still have your traditional guard points. You know, you press your right trigger and your triangle just as you're about to get hit. You get your guard points. Now, obviously, this was also the same thing as it is in Rise, but because we are using the counter one, that means that if we do super amped elemental discharge after it, we are going to be we're going to be getting additional damage, as you guys will hear. Ding! You hear the ting? That means the files deal more damage. That's what that means. The recovery is still not good enough though, but basically, apart from the, you know, the files lasting longer whenever we are in this mode, apart from the firing pin lasting longer and you having to manually detonate it using air dash or any other axe attack really, the playstyle is pretty much the same that you had in Monster Hunter Rise if all you want to do is SAD spam or a D spam or any of that stuff, right? Keep in mind, because I know that a lot of people tend to forget, you can cancel your super amped elemental discharge into a regular elemental discharge by pressing back and Y. I'm just reiterating this because a lot of people tend to forget that. And personally, I still tend to miss that particular input quite often. Don't ask me why. I've never been particularly good at doing the cancel. Let's try that again. There it is. Amped element discharge. You press back and triangle and you should be fine, right? So all of this works pretty much the same. So now the other thing that you guys will want to check out for sure, I already showed you guys air dash, showed you guys how that works, how you can use that in combination with condensed spinning slash. You guys are going to want to check out, okay, Rurikhan, show me friggin' ready stance. Like what's happening with ready stance. All right, so we're gonna go ahead, and since we already have the sword in amped mode, we're gonna swap over to blue after we go to axe, and that gives us the condensed spinning slash. And so what you do is you come over here and you can block with it. Now, if you allow it to go back, it goes into sword mode. That's bad because now you don't have your condensed spinning slash anymore. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you follow it up with a circle attack. So, and that's going to give you the double spin attack, right? Which is pretty good. Now, the other advantage of ready stance is that it allows you to reposition. So say, for instance, I'm doing my X attack here, and it's like, well, I mean, I'm still hitting it, but like, let's say, for instance, I wasn't hitting it. Let's say the monster, like, reposition. Damn, actually, it's kind of almost hard not to hit. Okay, let's say, oh, I'm not hitting my double attack anymore. All right, so here's something that you can do. You can do this, and then you can ready stance, ready stance in the opposite direction, or you can ready stance in this direction. You can ready stance in this direction. You can ready stance in that direction. This is like great friggin' facing correction. Notice how I'm just like repositioning. All you gotta do is reposition the ready stance and you'll be attacking any direction that you want. Now, another cool thing about ready stance, although I have to change my gear for this, as I was saying, another interesting thing about ready stance is, if you guys noticed, I wasn't getting knocked back too hard because I have guard 3 in this set. But now, I've taken away 3 pieces of my armor, so by the way, don't pay any attention to the damage numbers that this is going to deal. But I've taken away 3 pieces of my armor, so I no longer have any guard. Now, when I was blocking that just fine and not getting knocked back too much, I was able to perform a counter using circle. However, if we get knocked back a little bit more, like so, you're not going to be able to do that. And as a matter of fact, that's going to default you to sword mode. And you're like, oh, well, that kind of sucks. Yeah, but it does enable you to do another counter, which is if after you get knocked back from doing a guard point with ready stance, you press circle and triangle, you're going to go into an SAED. So those are kind of like your 2 counter options as you do ready stance and you actually block an attack. Your 2 counter options are going to be, you can either go into the axe double swing or you can go into an SAED, right? Now, another important thing is, some of you guys might be like, well, Rurikhan, I was trying to do it like you were doing it, but I wasn't getting the same results. See, I was doing this ready stance to reposition myself, but then he would just do element discharge 1 instead of element discharge 2. That's because you're inputting a directional input. See, what you want to do is you want to input the direction that you want to be facing in for the ready stance, but after that you have to let go of the directional input in order to get the axe discharge 2, right? So like this. So keep that in mind. If you're getting like only axe element 1, it means that you are inputting a directional input into the skill. And it's kind of like, from a mechanical standpoint, that's kind of like some of the changes that you are getting with the charge blade, right? I showed you guys how the firing pin works, which is the one that I tend to use nowadays. Showed you guys how the air dash works, which is something that actually changes the way that you play the game. And now I wanted to show you guys something else, and that is elemental damage charge blades are actually extremely viable, which is something that was not the case when it came to Monster Hunter Rise. Like, sure, you could play with them, but their performance was pretty lackluster. So I want you to watch this, right? We're actually going to go ahead and we're going to put, like, let me just detonate this one. We're going to go ahead and we're going to put like 6 files into the monster for really just maximum possible damage, right? So 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3, and just one more for good measure. But this should be like maximum file discharges. And now we're going to super amped elemental discharge with, like, this build is pretty good. If we look at our stats here, we got attack boost, agitator, weakness exploit, razor sharp, we got max artillery, load shells, the works, right? So attack boost and artillery, and this weapon has 360 raw, which is pretty good. So we have a lot of attack, right? So we're going to go ahead and pop off on an SAD, even though I just lost my files. As I was saying, we're going to go ahead and pop off an SAD, and I want you guys to pay attention to the damage, right? This is lots of attack, lots of damage, lots of good stuff for raw damage. Boom! 1,500 damage. That's not too shabby, right? You know, that's pretty good. So now let's take a look at what an elemental charge blade can do. Okay, and this one's going to be a pretty beefy one. I was working on this build yesterday. It's not perfect because I don't really have a good charm to go with it, unfortunately. But you are looking at Thunder Attack level 5, Storm Soul level 5, which increases your Thunder Attack by like 15% and grants me +1 to all skills. So basically, I kind of feel like this is as high as thunder damage is going to go. As a default, we have 107. We also have chain crit, so I'm going to be doing I would like to do this one a little bit faster, but it doesn't even matter. It's not even going to influence it that much. Let's just say that you would deal a lot more damage if I was to instantly follow up, but we're going to let it go. We're going to let it go without really taking advantage of chain crit, just because I want to see the clean damage number. So earlier, we did 1,500, right? So let's go ahead and just Pop off a couple more of these. And now, let's let that combo go. Should be popping off any time now. Damn it, there's like an input problem. Like, I've seen a lot of people complain about this. Sometimes you try and do an SAD, there's an input lag thing. My! 2,100 damage. That was considerably more. I don't actually know what the resistances are in the training dummy, to be honest. Never bothered checking it. But that's a whole lot more damage. So keep in mind that right now, Elemental Charge Blade is not only viable, it's pretty much preferable in a lot of situations. So keep that in mind. And this, by the way, is also true if you happen to do the air dash with the file discharge at the end. So that was 642 damage for one file. If you scroll back earlier in the video to when we were doing it with the raw damage charge blade, that was hitting for like 200 something. Almost 300, respectable, but it was nowhere close to the potential of friggin' Elemental Charge Blade. It is wild, my dudes. Trust me on that. And here's the thing. You always got to remember that you can also do air dash with 604, bruh. 642 damage. Do you understand? Look at this. And I'm not even sure if this is like max damage that I can achieve with this build. Because like I said, I just started experimenting with this yesterday. But it is friggin' wild. Okay, so now we're going to be talking about which armor skills would I consider to be important if you're doing a Charge Blade mix set. I'm not going to show you like a mix set right here because I'm going to be doing separate videos for the mix sets. But in the case of an Elemental Charge Blade, you obviously want to max out the element. You also want to have a Charge Blade that has a respectable amount of element. If you see right here, the Asylum Pearl, which is the Narwa Charge Blade, is coming in with 75 Thunder. That's the most Thunder damage you will find in any Charge Blade. Also keep in mind that if you want to do an Elemental Charge Blade, it needs to say File Type Element File. It's not just about how high the element goes, it's also about the file type, because if you have high element and impact file, it doesn't matter. Like, it's, you know, the elemental damage still contributes to the hunt, but it's not going to contribute to the file damage. You're not going to be seeing those big numbers that you were seeing there, right? So let's talk about the actual skill. So if you're doing an Elemental Charge Blade, you want to max out the element. So in our case, we're doing Thunder Elemental Charge Blade for this set, so we want to max out Thunder attack. Now, another thing that I'm doing here is I'm also using Storm Soul, which increases my Thunder damage by 15%. There are other such skills that increase by percentages, so this also increases your dragon damage by 15%. And there's another skill on top of it that can also increase dragon damage by an additional 20% when you're inflicted with Dragon Blight, but I don't want to talk about that one right here. So another skill that I would recommend before you even go for Weakness Exploit, right? So you got max out the elemental damage of your Charge Blade. I would go for 3 guard so that you can do guard points, so that you can do, you know, ready stance if that is something that you want to do, so that you can do all of those things, right? You want to go Rapid Morph 3 as well, because that makes it so that you morph between axe and sword mode faster. That's my personal recommendation. Chain Crit, if you're doing elemental damage Charge Blades, because Chain Crit increases the elemental damage of your weapon. 1 point guard up just so that you can block everything. The offensive guard is optional. Slugger, you don't need it. Load Shells I'd recommend, not mandatory. What Load Shells does is it basically allows you to charge for full files on yellow as opposed to having to be on red. Evade Extender, at least 1 or 2 points, always comes in handy. And yeah, that's pretty much, you know, the really needed stuff for elemental, right? If I go into my raw damage build, like if you're doing an impact, what I would recommend is, for starters, you want a weapon with a lot of raw, because the more raw, the more damage those files are going to deal. That's why I went with the Grand Gordlock, that, and due to the fact that I just tend to have a natural affinity towards our boy Garen Golem weapons. That's just something that I like. But then in skills, you know, attack boost is going to increase the damage of your files, but it's not the most important one. Most important is obviously going to be artillery, because artillery increases the damage of your files. Obviously, once again, you want to get those load shells. You want to get 1 or 2 points in Evade Extender. The reason I recommend Evade Extender is because they kind of nerfed how much the Charge Blade moves in Monster Hunter Rise for the side slashes and stuff like that. So one point of hit extender really helps you just move around the field a little bit better. But yeah, apart from that, 3 guard once again, 1 point and guard up, the basics so that you can do guard points comfortably and whatnot. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Those are the recommended skills. I already talked about switch skills. I think this pretty much covers everything. But as per usual, just like I did for my switch axe, I'm going to ask all of you Charge Blade mains out there that want to help contribute to this video, then feel free to leave anything that I've missed or any particular tips and recommendations that you have for people that want to try out the Charge Blade in the comment section, and I will mark those with the heart thing so that it puts them up at the top so that there's more information for people out there. Hopefully this guide helped you. If it did, hit the like button because that helps me out a lot. Subscribe, bell notification icon, all of that jazz. And remember, if you guys watch this and you're like, I'm so confused, like he didn't explain to me how to charge my shield, didn't explain how to charge my sword. I did that already in the Monster Hunter Rise base video. The game hasn't changed. It's just there's new skills and I want to focus on the Sunbreak stuff. Otherwise, this video would be far too long. This video is already far too long. I'm out of here. Stay strong. Stay safe. Peace out.